Howdy everyone, and welcome to the Serial Geek TV YouTube channel. My name is James Eatock, and today we're going to take a look at a pretty rare and awesome piece of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe history. But speaking of history, I guess we should go back a few years. As I've mentioned on this channel before, I've been friends with writer and storyboard artist Robert Lamb since 1998, after the former Filmation staff member stumbled upon the He-Man and She-Ra episode review website that I ran with my good pal Zadok Angel. In those early days, Rob shared some truly amazing pieces of Filmation production material from a variety of shows, but what he shared with us that related to He-Man and She-Ra was pretty epic. The original Michael Halperin Masters of the Universe series Bible, storyboards, sketches, scripts, photos, model sheets, unused production material, even a map of the Whispering Woods he created when he was a staff writer on She-Ra. Even to this day, every once in a while, Rob still shares items with me that continue to blow my mind. At PowerCon 2018, both Rob and I were to be in attendance. Rob had mentioned to me that he was bringing something special that he had never told me about. He had me more than intrigued. At one point, Rob called me over to his table and showed me a literal treasure chest. He beckoned me to open it, but to be very careful with regards to handling the contents within. What could it be? A mogwai? A wad of cash? The unseen item from the briefcase in Pulp Fiction? Well, it was none of the above. Inside were 2 reels, and one of these reels was something truly special. If you'll allow me to go off on a tangent for a moment or two.
Strength of the bear!
As you should all know by now, most cartoons of the 1980s had a stock transformation sequence or two, from Filmation shows to geek shows, to Marvel production shows, even Tokyo Movie Shinsha shows.
Bionics on!
All of them would, at times, incorporate a striking animated sequence, a sequence that required the editors to simply duplicate the footage from the existing piece of negative film and splice it into the relevant episode where required. Filmation shows were probably the most noteworthy for doing this, with both He-Man and She-Ra's transformation sequences being used well over 100 times each. On the storyboard, the transformation sequence will be illustrated with a note to dupe neg in big bold letters. I could go in depth about how the transformation sequence was accomplished, but I'll save that video for another time because it'll be worth it. Or you can let me know in the comments below how much you want that video and I'll hasten to make it happen. Now, back to PowerCon, Robert Lamb, his treasure chest, and those 2 reels. Well, one reel was a transition test by Bob Arkwright. The transition was used in the episode Evil Seed, which, even though given the production code of episode 25, wasn't actually worked on until the final batch of season 1 episodes. Though through some research, Dusan Mitrovic and I realised that at one point this transition effect was going to be used in the introduction sequence when we see Orko casting his spell, but traditional effects painted on cells were used instead. And if you're wondering what those thumbnails are, they are actually the original thumbnail sketches for the introduction sequence, probably one of the earliest pieces of production art with regards to that famous opening, with some interesting differences. But that, as I like to say, is another video for another time. What was on the other reel, I hear you ask? Well, it was the Prince Adam to He-Man transformation sequence, specifically the part with the image of Castle Grayskull appearing behind our hero. The sequence throughout the storyboards and reference material is known as Stock 77, with He-Man's I Have the Power being Stock 78 and Cringer transforming into Battle Cat. Yeah, you get the idea, Stock 79. This fascinating piece of film not only contained extra frames either side of the sequence, but also had a slate card at the start indicating information about this sequence that, up until this point, had remained a mystery. Looking at the slate and ignoring the misspelling of Filmation, we learn that the sequence we see in many episodes was the 6th take, implying that 5 takes before this had failed in some way, or were rejected versions of the same sequence, Most fascinatingly of all, we learn that this sequence was shot to film on the 9th of March 1983. So if you're watching this video and you were born on that day, happy birthday? The other lovely thing about the reel is that it showcases all of the animation art that was placed under the camera, including the areas that were never meant to be seen. Here is how the transformation looks with a good digital transfer, but the same frame from the reel reveals a lot more of the image. Of course, as I say, these areas were never meant to be seen, but it's interesting to see the full image nonetheless, as you can see the edge of the background, the edge of the effects, and even the camera operator's fingers holding down the camera frame. With the film reel in my possession, I used my relatively good scanner, which has the ability to scan film and even negatives, and scanned each frame. It was a lengthy and time-consuming process. I scanned each frame at 4800 dpi, which, as you can imagine, took a fair amount of time to do, but the end result did look good. Plus, when Dusan Mitrovic boosted the image, it really did look rather striking. On 8mm, a scanning facility devoted to digitally encoding a plethora of analog film formats, is a company that I've used before, and in time you'll see some of the transfers I've had them do on this very channel. I decided to approach the company with the reel to see what they could do, as I had a feeling that their scanning equipment would be slightly better than mine. And here is what on 8mm were able to achieve. Now you can see, as I zoom in closer to this image, that scanning positive film can only do so much. Scanning the original 35mm negative reel would yield very different results. Maybe one day. I thought I'd also present these frames at a much slower pace so you can truly appreciate the rawness of this piece of film. As I said earlier, at some point I will make a lengthy video detailing how the transformation sequence was created, because it was so ridiculously complicated, but I guess the hard work paid off as it went on to become one of the most iconic sequences of 1980s animation. For now, I can talk about the basics of the transformation and the things that you may never catch during an episode. For example, although Castle Grayskull is a background, it's actually painted onto an acetate cell, which makes it a very delicate piece of animation art. Why did they paint backgrounds on cells? Well, this enabled them to shoot, animate things under the background, and in the case of this sequence we have two cards, one dark purple sky and one light purple sky. If you look at the left of this image, you can see the card changes every 2 frames between the 2 shades of purple. Here's a fun fact that I pointed out on my He-Man and She-Ra blog many years ago. Yes, I used to have a blog. The stock sequence of Prince Adam changing into He-Man in the introduction sequence is actually different to the one seen in the episodes themselves. You may have always noticed that it seems faster. This is because they reshot the scene, eliminating certain frames and retiming the yellow flash so that it occurs earlier. How's that for a geeky fact? Now, you may be wondering why I know the most minute details about this sequence. Well, when Dusan and I were working on the return of Faker, we had to recreate the transformation sequence, and so in order to get this sequence as perfect as we could, I created an Excel spreadsheet timing out every single frame, as well as stating what animation loops had to occur, because trust me when I say that there are a few occurring on screen all at once. So there you go, a fascinating insight into one of the most striking and memorable sequences to come out of the 1980s. And that's the end of this video. Thank you for watching. Please be sure to like, comment, share and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one.